I'm Effie, and this video is going to be my Kindle Unlimited TBR. And because I'm me, it's very vampire-y. As much as I have somehow made vampires kind of my brand, sort of, it isn't the only thing I read, but I do really like a vampire book. And I like a vampire book that has something a little bit different to say. So this is, well, I think the concept of a Kindle Unlimited TBR is pretty well known, but essentially these are the books that I've borrowed from Kindle Unlimited that I want to read. Pretty self-explanatory. I will say that I am like a massive mood reader, so I make no promises about when or even really if I will read all of these books. Obviously, they are books that I am very interested in right now, and yeah, I just thought, like, let's be all snuggly. I am currently sat in bed and I've got my laptop next to me to... Oh, I will have to put it on charge, one sec. As I was saying, I've got my laptop next to me so I can read through the blurbs, and I'll just talk a little bit about why each individual book appealed to me. And yeah, it's just generally going to be a very kind of chilled, cozy vibe, so hopefully you enjoy. These are in no particular order, by the way. They're just like the order that the tabs on my laptop browser are. So first up, we have Under the Blood Red Moon by Emma Boxer. When Sabine lost her parents, she thought she was destined for a life of foster homes and disappointment, but her luck is transformed overnight when a mysterious and handsome vampire appears, offering to take her as his familiar. She now must learn how to hunt for the kind of prey only a vampire desires. 10 years later, Sabine is all grown up and has the chance to win herself immortality. Completing in a series of trials against other familiars, Sabine's skills and resolve will be put to the test. But when she meets her competitors, things get complicated. A lethal but gorgeous woman, a mysterious brooding man, and a child she feels she must protect at all costs. Sabine will need to make the decision very quickly about what or who she truly desires. Under the Blood Red Moon is a queer, new adult fantasy novel exploring the liberation of a young woman who discovers she can have the life she has always dreamed of if she can only bring herself to fight for it. So the two things that really stood out to me from that blurb that made me go, yep, I want to add that to my list, are the fact that it features trials, because I am an absolute sucker for a book where there are trials taking place. And the second thing is that it's queer, and, you know, there seems to be multiple love interests. I don't know if it's going to be poly, how it's all going to play out, but yeah, trials and queer sound very much like my cup of tea. Apologies if there's a notable change in the audio. I can hear beeping every so often, and I don't know if it's being picked up on my internal mic, so I've cracked out an external mic to hopefully improve any potential issues with audio quality. I don't know, you don't need to know the ins and outs, but maybe you find it interesting. So the next book is Save a Life, Tell a Lie by Darcy R. Acula, and it says, stalker or vampire, the choice is yours, but if you make the wrong one, you die. He spent months watching my every move, stalking me from the shadows, waiting for the right moment. When he strikes, I'm not ready. I'm surrounded by strangers and far from anyone who might have cared, or at the very least, noticed if I suddenly disappeared. He's closing the distance, leaving me with a terrifying choice. Take my chances with my stalker, or seek help from a monster more powerful than him. Making the wrong choice could cost me my life. Risking it all, I throw myself at an extraordinarily handsome stranger, a stranger who just happens to be a vampire. He also happens to be the crown prince of vampires, and he's disgusted by humans. I haven't even been bitten yet, and my life already sucks. It's too late to rethink my plan, and I'm out of options. I beg the stranger to claim he knows me. Instead, the vampire claims me. But my stalker isn't ready to admit defeat, and the vampire I sought refuge with isn't willing to let me go. A stalker, a vampire, a choice that might end my life. So I think it's mostly the crown prince of the vampires that pulled me in with that. But also it just feels like the kind of story I'm going to enjoy. You know, possibly a little bit goofy, how she's like, help me. And he's like, well, I'm just going to have you. But I think it could really work. I mean, it could go in the other direction, but it's not as if just because I pick up a book, I am obligated to finish it. But I think there's a lot about it that I could end up enjoying. And then the next two are actually graphic novels. I really like getting graphic novels on KU because I think the way that the Kindle does like the individual panels zoomed in works really well. Also, I mean, maybe not so much in the case of this one, but I feel like a lot of the time graphic novels can be pretty expensive to get, so getting it on KU just feels like a really good bargain. So the first graphic novel we've got is 30 Days of Night, Volume 1 by Steve Niles, and the artist is Ben Temple-Smith. And it says, collects all 3 issues of 30 Days of Night from Stephen Niles and Ben Temple-Smith. The story of an isolated Alaskan town that is plunged into darkness for a month each year when the sun sinks below the horizon. As the last rays of light fade, the town is attacked by a bloodthirsty gang of vampires bent on an uninterrupted orgy of destruction. I don't know why I made that a question. Only the small town's husband and wife sheriff team stand between the survivors and certain destruction. So, as is the case for this and for the next one, it's mostly just vampire graphic novel. Yeah, I'll get that on KU. And then we've got American Vampire Volume 1 by Scott Snyder and Stephen King with Raphael Albuquerque, I think, as the illustrator artist. Says this volume follows 2 stories, one written by Scott Snyder and one written by legendary horror writer Stephen King. In Snyder's story, set in 1920s LA, we follow Pearl, a young woman who is turned into a vampire and sets out on a path of righteous revenge against the European vampires who tortured and abused her. This story is paired with King's story, a western about Skinner Sweet, the original American vampire, a stronger, faster creature than any vampire ever seen before. So, you know, they both sound really good. And looking on the website now, it seems that there are 6 volumes to American Vampire, and all of them are available on KU, which I think will be lots of fun. I can see myself borrowing all 6 eventually. Then we've got Black Sun by Michelle Maddow. So I mostly read the actual like main text of the story, but I think part of what drew me to this particular, of the blurb I mean, but what drew me to this particular one was in the kind of, you know, the bold hook they have at the top that's like, this is a best-selling author. And I'm like, that doesn't really, like, I'm sure it does mean something to some people, and it means a lot to authors, obviously, because, like, it's really cool to be a bestseller, I imagine. But to me, like, I don't look at that. I think it feels so ubiquitous. But also that's beside the point. So it says, a deal with the Vampire King, a discovery of magic, and a fight for her freedom. Dive into USA Today best-selling author Michelle Madow's completed Vampire Bride series, where the classic Hades and Persephone myth gets a dark and romantic twist. Amber Benson has no idea what to do for the rest of her life, let alone what major to pick for college. So when she inherits an apartment in Manhattan from a grandmother she never knew, she jumps at the chance for a fresh start. Her plan to find herself is soon derailed on the subway, where she's attacked by demons. Even crazier, she defends herself with something she never knew existed: magic. Before she can process what happened, a stunning, otherworldly warrior sweeps her away to a hidden, supernatural realm in the heart of the city. His name is Damien Fairmont, and he's not just any vampire. He's the king of a secret vampire kingdom, and he's just announced that Amber is destined to be his bride. Now Amber needs to find a way to escape her so-called fate, but Damien isn't her only problem, because sinister forces are rising in the city, drawn to the power of her untapped magic. Will she embrace her destiny as the queen of the vampire kingdom, or will she fight to forge her own path? So the big thing for me is that I do get a little bit tired of Greek mythology, but I think Hades and Persephone is one of those where maybe I just don't know the original mythos very well, or maybe it's just kind of a story or a pairing that works really well for me. And I like the idea of a vampire twist on the mythos of Hades and Persephone. In fact, I'm pretty sure that Ben Alderson has a male twist on it. I could be wrong. So there's definitely at least one other Hades and Persephone with a vampire twist. But I'm just, I'm excited to read them. And speaking of Ben Alderson, I don't think he's on my list here, but that's because I have plans to read them physically. Sorry, I don't know why it took me a while to string that sentence together, but yeah, I've got plans to read his books physically, and I think I'm going to have content around that. We will see. The next book we've got is book 2 in a series, but it's like a series of standalones, and I popped it on because I absolutely loved it. So the first book in the series is How to Bite Your Neighbour and Win a Wager, and it was really cute, banter's off the charts, just wholesome as well, very enjoyable vampire book, which I'm sure I will talk about in my next vampire recent reads video, or whatever I call that series. But this book is How to Sell Your Blood and Fall in Love, and the author is D.N. Bryn. I'm not sure if it's Bryn or Byrne. No, I think it's Bryn. B-R-Y-N. No romantic story has ever lived up to Dr. Clementine Hughes's reality, but at least he has his steamy 2 million word fanfic and a prestigious research position at Vitalis Baron Pharmaceuticals, where their benefits are superb and their experimentation on vampires highly unethical. When a mysterious accident turns Clementine into a vampire, discovery would demote him to a lab rat, and his growing thirst for his co-workers' veins forces him to the streets to hunt. Justin Yu is usually the one attacking villains in alleys, not the other way around. After the tragedy he brought upon his local vampiric community in his youth, he struggled tirelessly to keep their vampires safe. So when a panicking Clementine botches a bite attempt, Justin takes pity and advantage and offers the vampire a trade, his blood in exchange for an exorbitant fee. In desperation, Clementine accepts. Justin's blood is bland and unappealing, but the more Clementine learns to appreciate the man's sharp humour and persistent compassion, the more he acquires a taste for Justin. Justin is determined not to let Clementine's good looks and thoughtful intellect distract him, as hunters from Vitalis Baron close in on Justin's neighborhood, and it turns out someone there knows Clementine's vampiric secret. Yeah, so the first book in this series was really, really good, and it made me want to continue. I think there's 3 main titles in the series and at least 2 related books, I think. I hope I have as good a time with this book as I did with How to Bite Your Neighbour and Win a Wager. I apologise if the lighting's being really weird. It's very typical Scottish weather today. Tethered by Elena R. Gallia. This is on my list because I've read a vampire fae duology from this author. I've also read a mermaid princess bodyguard romance from this author, and I really enjoy her writing, and this is one that I see her marketing all the time and I go, yeah, I really want to read that. What could be worse than an arranged marriage to a vampire prince? When Luna is sold into marriage to the Prince of Darkness on her 21st birthday, she thinks she knows what to expect. Arranged marriages happen all the time, right? Wrong. No one could have prepared her for the reality of being married to the vampire prince. Ever since the day he was made, Sebastian has been living according to Queen Marguerite's rules. After all, he's only alive because of her. When she orders him to marry and bind himself to Luna, a human hailing from a neighbouring kingdom, he has no choice. He agrees to the marriage, but he never expects to feel anything for her. When their binding ceremony goes awry and they are magically tethered, everything is thrown into upheaval. Unable to leave each other's presence, they must learn to live with each other or die. So, forced proximity, arranged marriage, vampires. I already feel like I'm going to have a really good time with this book. And there's like 3 books in the main series. And then there's 1 follow-on one coming, I think. And it's also kind of related to her other works. Basically, this is an author that I've enjoyed and I just want to read all the things from her. Love Letters and Thirst Tonics by Hayley Blackwood. 2 vampires, a magical town, and a spoonful of spice. Love sucks, literally. For Fiella, life in the magical village of Moonvale used to be peaceful. Her world is turned upside down when a magical attack destroys her trinket shop and everything she has worked for. She is devastated but finds solace in her new friendship with an anonymous pen pal whose letters ease her troubled mind. Red has fled his home in Sunhaven as a last-ditch effort to get a fresh start and escape the bad luck that has been plaguing him. He finds himself in Moonvale, where all the annoyingly friendly local folk seem to need his help. His outlook changes when he lays eyes on a lovely fellow vampire whose blue hair and fiery temperament ensnare his thoughts. Limits are tested and bonds are forged when Fiella is forced to accept Red's help to rebuild her shop. With the help of 2 friends, magical potions, the local cats, and a few goblets of cider, Fiella and Red team up to restore what was lost. As the 2 vampires battle their thirst together through late nights and endless bickering, they might even learn to appreciate each other. So this is one where I've seen a few of my mutuals on Instagram talking about it, and it's just made me really intrigued. I think it's meant to be quite a cozy series, and I'm still not really sure where I stand with cozy. I've had very mixed results. Like, I really didn't enjoy Bookshops and Bone Dust, but I loved the Shoestring Theory. I can't remember if it's got a definite article or not. And I also had a really good time with The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches. So I've had some good books, I've had some bad books, but also vampires, I think, is probably going to weigh it in the positive when it comes to cozy. But we will see. The Vampire Knitting Club by Nancy Warren. So this one I first was intrigued by because I was like, oh, what a weird concept. But then I read the blurb and it actually does sound really fun. Vampires who knit, a troublemaking witch, who killed Granny, and is she really dead? At a crossroads between a cringeworthy past, Todd the Toad, and an uncertain future, she's not exactly homeless, but it's close. Lucy Swift travels to Oxford to visit her grandmother. With Gran's undying love to count on, and Cardinal Wolsey's, Gran's knitting shop, to keep her busy, Lucy can catch her breath and figure out what she's going to do. Except it turns out that Gran is the Undying, or at least the undead. But there's a death certificate and a will leaving the knitting shop to Lucy. And a lot of people are going in and out who never use the door, including Gran, who is just as loving as ever and prone to knitting sweaters at warp speed late at night. What exactly is going on? When Lucy discovers that Gran did not die peacefully in her sleep, but was murdered, she has to bring the killer to justice without tipping off the law that there's no body in the grave. Between a hot 600-year-old vampire and a dishy detective inspector, both of whom always seem to be there for her, Lucy finds her life getting more complicated than a triple cable cardigan. The only one who seems to know what's going on is her cat. Or is it her familiar? So you can see how, like, what might seem like a quirky concept actually sounds like a really enjoyable story. Again, it sounds like it's going to be cozy, but also it being a murder mystery adds a little bit of intrigue and suspense, and it sounds like there's going to be a little bit of romance, but it's more going to be on what's going on. Maybe it's going to be about Lucy finding herself. Just seems like there's a lot of fun elements to this story. The Vampire's Bargain by Jasmine Walt. Kitana Nightshade is one of the most powerful witches in Valenterra. A fierce defender of witchkind and humanity, she stands as a bastion against the vicious threat of the vampire kingdom, rising to become the deadliest vampire hunter the world has ever known. That is, until her lover betrays her in cold blood, sealing her away in a magical prison so he can take her power for himself. For 50 long years, Kitana has dreamed of nothing but vengeance, but when she is finally freed from her magical prison, it's not by a fellow witch, but by an enigmatic and dangerous vampire lord. The bargain he offers her is simple. Assassinate the Vampire King, and in return he'll help her take back her coven and enact her revenge. Normally Kitana would never ally with a vampire, but the world she left behind 50 years ago has changed. The sun has disappeared, the vampires have conquered the human kingdoms, and the witches are nowhere to be found. The only person Kitana can trust is herself. Yet in this new realm shrouded by darkness and abandoned by the gods, that may not be enough. And when a shattering truth is revealed, Kitana must decide what is most important, vengeance or the price of her heart. I think the thing that drew me most to this book was this cover. Now, this is not the cover that is on the paperback. I don't know if it's been picked up by a publisher. I'm sure someone in my comments that's more in the know might be able to tell you, but I so prefer this cover to this cover, and that was kind of what drew me in. But also it does sound like it's an intriguing story. I also think that being locked away for 50 years, so the character being technically a bit older, creates a bit more of an interesting dynamic. Vampires. I think that's the case for a lot of them. I just need to say vampires, and that's enough for me a lot of the time, Ashvale, The Vampire's Thrall by Jade Church. For everyone who prefers... Oh yes, it's literally this first line that got me going, yep. I want to add that to my KU TBR. For everyone who prefers their vampires with the humanity switch off. Leonora Romilly was murdered. The catch, she didn't stay dead. Instead, she finds herself alive-ish and swept away to Asheville to learn how to be a fully functional, albeit undead, member of society. At Asheville, the blood runs free and the sexual tension never sleeps, but under the surface, something much more sinister lurks. With her would-be murderer still roaming free, a newfound love and her lost memories on the line, can Leonora survive Asheville with both her head and her heart intact? So, as I say, it was the vampires with their humanity switched off that intrigued me. Obviously, that, I don't know if it is obvious. I think so. Like, if you're watching this and a fan of vampires, you probably know. But it's a reference to the Vampire Diaries. And I like the idea that they're savage, but in a really engaging way, which is what I read from that anyway. And like, I was telling my best friend, and she was immediately like, yep, I need to make a note of that. That sounds great. So very excited to see how this story goes. Lettifer by T.D. Cloud. Gabriel Spencer is a Detroit beat cop determined to make detective by any means possible. And putting an end to a mysterious string of murders looks like the quickest way to accomplish that goal. Prostitutes and escorts drained of blood, bodies abandoned in ditches, playgrounds and dumpsters. It all reeks of a similar spate of killings from the decades past. And no one but Gabriel seems to see the connection. Modern crimes, however, can sometimes have ancient origins, and unfortunately for Gabriel, he fails to account for the real culprit, or the thought that perhaps he isn't the only one on the hunt for a killer. A vampiric crime thriller tinged with romance, horror, and intense world building, Lettifer serves as a standalone novel in the Dark Vagary series. So, books that involve, like, police officers as main characters aren't usually my thing. But in the case of Lettifer, I've read Infaust by the same author, and I am like absolutely obsessed with it. I really enjoyed it. So that makes me go, yeah, I could get behind a vampire story from this same author. Yes, please. So Lettifer made it onto my list. The Vampire's Familiar by T.J. Nichols. He came looking for revenge. Will he walk away from love? 20 years after fleeing Madison Gully as a scared 16-year-old, after witnessing his sister's murder, Kirk Gracewell returns as a powerful energy vampire. He wants to find the cougar shifter who killed her and make them pay. Every 10 years, the Madison Cougars get together. It's a time of celebration to meet new partners, but also for the seer to announce who get the greatest honour any of them can receive, becoming a familiar to a witch. When the seer gives Sage the task of watching the vampire that suddenly arrived, Sage feels slighted. It's a job for a much younger cougar. But he comes to enjoy the games of cat and mouse he plays with Kirk, until he learns why the vampire is in Madison Gully. Now Sage will have to choose, protect his family or help Kirk find the killer. But the killer will stop at nothing to prove to the seer the honour of familiar is his, claim a witch and bury the past. So the thing that had me intrigued with this specific book was the fact that it features an energy vampire. And, you know, a lot of people when they think of vampires, they think of a very specific image of a vampire, and that often involves blood, but it isn't the only kind of vampire lore that's pretty common. So energy and or souls are another pretty common, you know, in the mythos of vampires around the world and whatnot. So I liked the idea that this was an energy vampire, something a little bit different, but also pretty enjoyable. And hopefully I will have a good time with it. Ruby and the V-Day Vampires. Oh, Vampire. Vampires. Oh, it's a pun. By J.L. Logos and Vera Valentine. They're magical monster hunting vampires living in a van. She's a fed up middle-aged divorcee attempting to geocache her Valentine's Day into oblivion. Perfect. Now the question is, can Quintain, Fletcher and Marcus convince Ruby that the best way to resurrect her love life is with a few guys that are also back from the dead? Ruby and the V-Day Vampires is a stimulating short story about the importance of cleaning up public parks, practicing safe archery, and that age and getting absolutely railed in the back of a van by 3 bi-vampires is only a state of mind. So I wouldn't normally read this, but like it's quite entertaining, this last bit. It says, this tale is written for adults and intended for 18 plus audiences only. It involves explicit group activity, unprotected interactions with said undead suitors and their nocturnal emissions, slight kidnapping, and the old fangy kiss to access liquid vampire chow, being impaled the fun way with 2 P's and 1 V, being impaled the not fun way, like with an arrow, sex pollen / poison, aka having to do the deed to survive, as well as brief mentions of homeowners associations, HOAs, and geocaching. It sounds really stupid in the best possible way. And I read a number of Vera Valentine books for a video that I made last year, and I am planning a follow-up where I read a bunch of what I don't know if there's a proper word for it, but like what I've dubbed object romances, like, you know, the books like Squeak and Unhinged and Stuffed. So I read a bunch of Vera Valentine's and I actually really enjoy the way she writes. Like, obviously they're a little bit weird and quirky, but they were just generally a really fun time. And like, it's a short story. You can do it in one sitting easily. So Ruby and the V-Day Vampires it is. Pyramidia by Stephanie Sanders Jacob. I think this is the only one that I'm not 100% sure if is actually vampires, but it just sounded too good to not add to my list. When Harriet moves to Bentwood to teach gifted students, her new life doesn't go as planned. Between her haunted rental and her oddball neighbour, Lucy, who literally won't go away, Harriet is left questioning her own sanity. The beautiful Kelsey, whom she meets at the farmer's market, offers the distraction she needs, while that and the town's multi-level marketing, MLM or pyramid scheme. The enigmatic group of women selling wellness in the form of serenity, with their perfect hair, flawless skin, and piercing eyes. She is drawn to the tea, the wellness, the tranquility. So what if she has to sell a few bags of tea? You have a new descendant. Oh, like downline. Sinking deeper into serenity, Harriet can't stop drinking the tea. She keeps getting emails about her new descendants, whatever the hell that means, and the gym teacher, Harold, is giving serious pervy vibes. Even Lucy joins the MLM, despite claiming the women are vampires. None of that matters though, because serenity makes her feel, well, tranquil. Until Lucy disappears and Harriet's world begins to crumble. Is serenity really a bunch of beautiful vampires? So what if they are? How far will Harriet go for tranquility? Are you well? As I say, I don't know if it actually is vampires, but it sounds so intriguing. And who doesn't love a book poking fun at MLMs? A Vow for the Vamp by Settlemyer. Millie, I've been alive for 500 years. Well, technically, I've been dead for 470 of those years. I'm bored as hell. I never wanted this life. I was turned into a vampire against my will and forced to kill alongside the one who sired me. I've lived with my guilt for too long. I'm ready to face the sun. Then I meet a man, a human. He's sunshine and smiles. I hate it. It's annoying, but adorable. Could he be my reason to continue living? Teddy, my life is over. After receiving devastating news, I go out drinking with my friends to numb it all. That's when I meet a woman. She's my complete opposite, dark, dangerous, beautiful. I need her. She takes me back to her place and the sex is amazing, the best I've ever had. Then I find out she's a vampire, immortal. She's the answer I've been looking for. Now how do I convince her to turn me? I feel like this blurb doesn't do it justice, but it's a plus size FMC who loves herself unashamedly, like as she should. And like grumpy sunshine, vampires, I think it's like kinky. I think there's a bit of a dominance and submission element to it. Like it sounds so good, and the author does a really good job of marketing it on Instagram, and immediately makes me go, yes, I need to read this. And it makes it really hard because there's, you know, a whole library of KU books on this TBR, and I'm like, where do I start? They all sound like things I want to pick up immediately. And the final two books that we've got are actually part of series, and both of these series are in their entirety. Well, the first one, there's a couple of books that still need to come out, but these series are in their entirety available on KU, and they are the first one is one that I've wanted to read for a while, and then the second one is like a series that I've read 2 books from the series already, absolutely adore and plan to continue, especially now it's on KU, but I do plan on actually getting physical copies. That's how much I love this series. So the first one is This Blood That Binds Us by S.L. Coakley. Kimberly Burns, a self-sufficient 19-year-old, expects her customary camping trip to be a calming escape from the non-stop demands of college life, but the attack from a recently turned vampire changes everything. Aaron Callum has been trying to resist the bloodlust raging through his new body, but the unfamiliar voice in his head won't let him pass up an easy meal. When he's left with a girl barely clinging to life, he must choose between loyalty to his brothers or his own morality. Aaron and Kimberly both want to return to their normal lives, but their problems are just beginning when they both realise they go to the same university. When Kimberly is bitten a second time by an unknown attacker, they must team up to navigate the vampire world together and find the assailant. Soon they discover that the mysterious past Aaron's brothers are hiding may hold the key to secrets that could tear apart their own pasts and destroy their future. So unfortunately, because this is something that I've had my eye on for a while, I can't actually remember what originally drew me to it, but I know that it is incredibly slow burn, very low spice levels, which, I mean, I have no real opinion on spice levels. I don't mind closed door, I don't mind door flung wide open. Basically, what's the point of having a door? I don't know what the actual term is. Like, I know closed door's one end of the spectrum, but I don't know what at least I think it is. I don't know what the other end of the spectrum's referred to as. But I don't really care spice level one way or the other. So it's very, very soft in that sense. I also believe that there's a lot of focus on like brotherly love, and that's a very core part of the story. And that like there is a romance, but as I say, it's very slow burn, and that's not the focus of the series, at least in the first few books. So yeah, really excited to finally get a chance to read this series. And then the final one is Law and Lust, and the specific book that I've got on my TBR is book 3, The Awakening. I don't think the blurb contains spoilers, but just in case it does, I'm just going to give probably a really rubbish overview of the series, but I'm going to try. So Law and Lust is set in like present day. So Carla Nicole is the author, by the way, and she does an incredible job of showing how anachronistic vampire society can be, in that when you read the first book, particularly the opening chapters, you think this could be set in Victorian England, because it just feels very like high society and of that time. And then you realize, no, it's present day. It's just that a lot of vampire culture is kind of steeped in the past. But she's also created this thing where like vampires exist within our world and are known, but they have their own like rules and society. So the vampires are queer normative, but they exist within our world, which obviously comes with, you know, transphobia, homophobia, etc. And I think it works really well. I love that the vampires are so queer normative, and like to the point that sexuality just isn't really a thing for the vampires. They just kind of exist, and I love that so much. So in the first book, you are following Nico, who comes with some trauma from his youth, and Haruka, who not so much from his youth, but has his own set of baggage, and these are both vampires, and there's a hierarchy to vampires, and they are both like the highest rung on the hierarchy, and vampires, like, it's looked down on to drink from anything other than another vampire, so they have to drink from each other, and it's basically like a friends to lovers situation. And I absolutely love it. It's beautiful. I don't know if it's like technically slow burn because they're together by the end of the book. It's a romance. I don't think that's a spoiler. But like it is quite it has the hallmarks of slow burn, where it feels like it's yearning looks and casual brushes of hands and just full of desire. And then when they get together, it's so beautiful. And I love this series so much. I cannot sing its praises high enough. So I'm so excited that this series is now on KU, because it means I get to read the rest of the series. But also it means other people are going to be discovering it and talking about it. And I love that for everyone. Anyway, that is my whole KU TBR. I'd love. I know KU is region specific, but I would love if you could drop in the comments other. I mean, it doesn't have to be vampires, but I'd love vampires, like other great books that are on KU that you would recommend. And let me know if you've discovered any books from this video that you go, oh, actually, I want to check that out. But until next time, love you. Bye.